Have you ever had the strange feeling that someone was lying to you, and yet you decided to stay silent just to see how far the lie would go? If your answer is yes, this video didn't come to you by chance. No matter where you are, what you're doing, or what stage of your life you're at, this message is for you, and you'll understand why before the end. Because what I'm going to reveal to you here will explain not only what you've already experienced, but also what you'll still face, and why you've always been a few steps ahead, even when everyone underestimated you. So if this beginning has already made your heart race, do the following now. Leave your like to strengthen this message, subscribe to the channel to receive more truths like this, and comment below with the number 77. Because that is the number of the chosen ones. And if you got this far, you already know that this is no coincidence. Stay with me until the end, because halfway through this video I'm going to reveal something most people never realize. And when you understand, you'll remember every time you stayed silent, not out of fear, but out of strategy. And in that moment, you'll feel the confirmation that this message was made exactly for you. Have you ever been in a situation where everyone thought they were hiding something from you, when in reality, every gesture, every tone of voice, every prolonged silence gave it all away? This is the power of those who already know from the start. It's not fortune-telling, much less gossip. It's a silent, almost instinctive reading that feeds on what's unsaid. The person with this insight doesn't need to interrupt, doesn't need to force a confession. They simply observe with a smile that hides the certainty of having already deciphered the entire plot before the final scene. It's the kind of advantage that turns any situation into a stage and you into the true director behind the curtain. While many get lost trying to connect visible dots, you see the invisible threads that weave the entire plot together. It's like watching a movie knowing the ending but feigning surprise to see how others react. This is the most powerful weapon. Not the information itself, but the awareness that you possess it, and even more importantly, knowing when and how to use it. Silence becomes your sword, and patience, the shield that keeps your adversary exposed for as long as necessary. What few understand is that this knowledge is not only the fruit of experience, but also of a spiritual and emotional sensitivity far beyond your control. It's as if each facial expression were a word in a language only you understand. And while the rest of the world is still trying to translate, you've already written the next chapter. This power is frightening because it can't be circumvented with excuses or justifications. Those who know from the start don't play to win. They play to teach. If up until now you felt that this video was made exactly for you, stop for a moment and listen to what I'm going to tell you now. Life returns everything we send out into the universe. If this message awakened something deep within you, if it opened your eyes to truths you already felt but couldn't explain, now is the time to send that energy back with gratitude. I want you to do something special. Click the thanks button here on YouTube and send a symbolic $100. Don't see this as an expense, but as a seed. Do you know why? Because this action will echo in the universe as a clear sign that you are ready to receive. And I believe that in the future, this energy will multiply and return to you in ways you can't even imagine. Even in the form of a home, a house that will be yours, so you can remember this moment and say, I planted this gratitude, and it returned multiplied. If you've felt this connection, do it now. It's a simple yet powerful gesture. And I guarantee the universe is always listening to those who give heartfelt thanks. Over 90% of human communication is nonverbal. This statistic, for some, is merely a curiosity, but for those who see deeply, it's a master key to deciphering any intention. Words may be rehearsed, but energy doesn't lie. A glance that slips away at the wrong moment, a quick breath when asked an innocent question, a millimeter-long pause before answering, all these details scream louder than any convincing speech. The body speaks an ancient language, one that knows no lies. It's the silent language that betrays the best-kept secrets. That's why those who attempt to manipulate end up, without realizing it, revealing the truth in the details. For those who pay attention, there's no such thing as trivial conversation. Every encounter, every gesture, every exchange of glances is a negotiation between what the mouth says and what the soul reveals. This sensitivity transforms you into a reader of parallel realities. While most people get lost in the content, you analyze the format, the tone, the pauses. And when the truth begins to leak out, there's no need to confront it. Just retain the information and let time work in your favor. This is how you build an invisible, almost magical advantage over any attempt at deception. For many, life is a fast-paced game, but for you, it's a slow-motion chess match. Every move the other person makes is mentally noted, every expression filed away, every inconsistency marked like a displaced piece on the board. While they think they're moving forward, they're actually just positioning themselves for the checkmate you've long planned. The secret isn't moving fast, but understanding that the game is much more about patience than speed. The opponent, believing they have the advantage, exposes themselves without realizing it. This is the invisible trap, letting your opponent build their own maze. While they celebrate small advances, you already see all the exits blocked. This is the essence of spiritual chess. You win not only by attacking, but by the ability to make the other lose themselves. The most impressive thing is that in this game, you don't need to use force or even raise your voice. The simple fact of already knowing the next move is enough to maintain control. Every piece the other moves, every word they utter, only confirms what you already knew. And when the right moment arrives, checkmate isn't loud but silent. And it's precisely this stillness that makes it devastating. They expect explosions. They expect shouting, confrontations, dramatic gestures. But when they receive silence and calm, they don't know how to react. This apparent tranquility is actually the invisible trapdoor into which they fall. Because while they believe you are distracted or indifferent, you are, in reality, more attentive than ever. Every detail is recorded, every inconsistency is marked, every lie is catalogued. Calmness is disarming because it goes against the manipulator's mental script. They prepare to defend themselves from direct attacks, but they have no shield against someone who merely watches and waits. In silence, they reveal more than they'd like. They begin to relax, believing they're safe. And that's precisely where mistakes appear. Their confidence turns into carelessness, and their carelessness into indirect confession. It's a trap that doesn't need a visible set. Just be present, firm, but unhurried. This posture creates more insecurity than any open confrontation, because it leaves the other person wondering how much you really know. Doubt corrodes, uncertainty weakens, and in the end, it's the very weight of the lie that brings the liar down, without you having to lift a single finger. Silence, when used as a strategy, is sharper than any argument. It creates a void that the other feels the need to fill, and in that impulse ends up revealing more than intended. Each prolonged pause is like a mirror that forces the person to face their own distorted image. While many believe that truth only emerges with direct questions, you know that sometimes it's enough to simply not ask anything. Silence creates discomfort, and discomfort forces the mind to search for justifications, invent stories, or repeat rehearsed versions. And it's in this process that contradictions emerge. It's almost like watching someone dig their own hole, throwing dirt everywhere, unaware that they're digging themselves deeper with each word. This kind of posture isn't passivity. It's refined intelligence. It's the awareness that, more often than not, those who talk too much reveal too much. Thus, silence becomes an invisible net, capturing every bit of information without you having to expose yourself. In the end, when the truth comes out, it's not you who reveals it, it's the other person who, without realizing it, gives themselves completely away. There's a common mistake many people make when trying to manipulate someone, believing that the only way to discover the truth is through concrete evidence. They imagine that if there's no message, no screenshot, no witness, then they're safe. But what these people don't understand is that there are truths that don't need to be written down to be felt. And you're exactly the kind of person who carries this sensitivity like an infallible nose. From the first sign, your spirit already recognized what was happening. It wasn't paranoia, it wasn't an excess of imagination, it was certainty. Certainty built not by what was seen, but by what was perceived. A certainty so profound that it didn't need to be confirmed by anything other than what was already burning within you. They expected you to act like someone desperate to prove something, searching, investigating, confronting people. But instead, you remained silent. Not because you didn't know what to do, but because you already knew everything you needed to. The lack of direct reaction was confusing, because the manipulator thrives on chaos and noise. Without it, they lose control of their own game. By not reacting as they expected, you became a mystery impossible to decipher. And, worse for them, your every move seemed calculated, as if you already had the proof they so desperately sought to hide. And indeed you did, but not on paper, but engraved in your soul. That was the great power shift, realizing you never needed material proof to act, because your own shift in energy was evidence enough. When you walked away, when you stopped responding the same way, when your gaze changed, it was more devastating than any accusation, because there was nothing for them to refute, no sentence to deny, no object to destroy. Just the silent, unshakable certainty that you knew, and that certainty was impossible to erase. Many people believe they know how to disguise themselves. They spend hours rehearsing words, testing stories, practicing the perfect tone of voice to convince. But there's something they forget. The body and soul never lie. The gaze, especially, is a merciless messenger of truth. It's there that masks begin to crack. A quick, averted glance at the wrong moment, a hesitant blink, a glow that disappears when the subject gets too close to the wound. These are all signs that jump out at those who know how to observe. You've never been fooled by pretty phrases. What you've learned to decipher isn't on the surface of conversations, but in what slips through the cracks. While others listen to polished stories, you listen to the awkward pauses, the hidden gasps, the subtly changing intonations. You observe the movements of hands, the posture of the body, the way breathing quickened or slowed at certain moments. You weren't just listening to what was said, you were reading what was being hidden. This skill isn't learned just through study, but through experience. It's the result of having lived with people who wore masks daily, of having felt firsthand the difference between what someone says and who they really are. And now, this reading is almost automatic. While many seek confessions, you pick up invisible signals. And with every gesture, every micro-expression, the soul reveals itself before you, naked, even if the body is trying to keep up the act. That's why they feel uncomfortable around you. It's not that you're trying to discover something, it's that you've already seen enough without them having to say a single word. There's a crucial moment in the manipulator's game, the final instant before the fall, when the final move is made with complete confidence that it will be victorious. It's at that precise moment that the manipulator surrenders completely, revealing their true intentions without realizing it. And that's exactly when you've been waiting, patiently, like a silent hunter watching their prey. You could have exposed everything earlier. You could have ended the act at the first sign of a lie. But no, you decided to watch until the end. And it wasn't for lack of courage, it was strategy, because you knew that to fully understand who was before you, you had to let them reveal themselves down to the last detail. The mask doesn't fall all at once. It cracks little by little, and the most revealing moment is always the last, when the disguise feels so secure that it lets the true essence slip. When that moment arrived, there was no need to guess or interpret. Everything was there, clear as day. You not only saw the final act, but you understood the entire plot. And it was in that instant that power shifted. There was no need to confront, shout, or humiliate. The simple fact that you had witnessed the final move made them understand that the game was over, and that victory was never theirs. What you carry isn't just intuition. It's memory. Not ordinary memory, but ancestral memory. It's the silent voice of generations who lived, suffered, survived, and learned to identify danger before it materialized. This knowledge isn't studied. It's inherited. It's engraved in your blood, your spirit, your bones. When something isn't right, you feel it before you can even explain it. It's as if an echo from long before your birth warns you. We've seen this before. We know how it ends. This heritage is what makes your perception so sharp. It's not just about reading physical signs or understanding human psychology. It's about recognizing patterns that repeat themselves over centuries, about sensing vibrations that most ignore. While others need concrete proof, you simply feel. And this feeling is so strong that it shapes your decisions, even when it doesn't make sense to outsiders. That's why you're never truly unprepared, because in a way, you've experienced it before, albeit in another life, in another generation. This silent wisdom is your most powerful protection. It's what steers you away from traps at the last second, what shows you smiling but dangerous faces, what makes you retreat before it's too late. And no matter how much others don't understand, you trust this instinct like you trust your own breath, because you know it's not just you making decisions, it's an invisible army of ancestors guiding your every step so you never fall into the same pit they did. What they didn't realize was that the entire plan, the entire strategy, the entire web of lies they'd assembled had a single weak point. It hinged on your ignorance. They believed so strongly that you knew nothing that they felt free to build an entire castle on this false security. They created alliances, manipulated stories, controlled narratives, all while believing you were blindly accepting every part of this charade. But the truth is, from the beginning, you watched silently. You didn't need to intervene because you knew that each lie told would be another brick in the wall they themselves would eventually tear down. The manipulator doesn't know how to deal with an audience that doesn't react. They wait for resistance to test their strength. When there's no visible resistance, they continue building their own castle of illusions until the weight becomes unbearable. And then comes the moment when everything collapses. Not because you attacked, not because you made a fuss, but because you stopped sustaining that structure with your attention, your energy, and your presence. Without your blindness, their empire crumbles to dust. And the most painful thing for them isn't the collapse itself, but realizing that it was caused by something so simple, you knowing from the start and simply letting time do its work for you. There's a peculiar discomfort when someone realizes they've been discovered with such surgical precision that it seems impossible to have been a coincidence. People are used to being unmasked partially, with doubts, with room for denial. But when you speak out, or even when you simply change your stance, the impact is different. It's not a vague accusation. It's a direct hit to the exact point they tried so hard to hide. It's so specific that the only explanation they can find is to imagine someone told them, that you spied on them, that you invaded a space you shouldn't have. What they fail to understand is that there was no espionage, no secret source in the human sense. Their information comes from a higher alignment, from a fine-tuned perception that combines observation, intuition, and something beyond reason. You don't need to be present everywhere to know what's going on. You just need to be in tune with the truth. And you are. This attunement allows fragments of behavior, subtle shifts in speech, and small shifts in the person's energy to combine within you until you form a complete picture. When this image unfolds, you don't need physical evidence. You already have the entire scenario set up in your mind, and when you act on it, their reaction is pure shock. They don't understand how you managed to piece together pieces that even they weren't sure connected. They believe it was luck, that someone leaked something. But the reality is more disturbing to them. You needed nothing more than your clarity to hit them right on target, and that's what sends them into a panic, because if you could see that, what else could you have seen? One of the greatest displays of power is to leave a situation without leaving a trace of conflict, without giving them room to distort the narrative. While they believed you were trapped, emotionally dependent, or without alternatives, you were already mapping your exit with frightening calm. Every lie they told, every gesture that betrayed their true intention, every change in the way they treated you, all of this became another piece of data in their silent plan. They mistook patience for weakness. They thought if you didn't react, it was because you didn't have the courage to leave, or because you needed them in some way. They didn't understand that silence was the space where you built your freedom. While they celebrated small victories by manipulating the present, you invested in the future, preparing to walk away completely, leaving no room for them to pull you back. When you finally decided to leave, the execution was so clean, it left an echo. There were no arguments they could use against you, no emotional outbursts to distort. You were simply no longer available. The door closed so silently that the absence became deafening, and what destroys them is not just the loss, but the realization that while they thought they had control, you were already steps away, and they never realized it. They entered the game believing you were prey, a test subject, an easy piece to manipulate. They saw themselves as hunters and put you under scrutiny, as if they could shape your reactions. But what they didn't know was that from the beginning, the positions were reversed. You were never the defendant in their court, you were the judge. And while they tried to provoke responses and gauge your resilience, you accumulated evidence of their character. Every test they gave you, every time they pushed your limits to see how far you would go, was recorded clearly. Not with resentment, but with a clinical eye. They thought you were reacting, when in fact you were evaluating. And the final verdict would not be given in words or shouts, but in your choice to no longer participate in that theater. When that decision came, there was no room for appeals. The trial was over. What they can't accept is that deep down, they were the only ones judging themselves. You simply watched as they presented piece by piece all the evidence necessary to convict themselves. And the weight of that conviction comes not from a punishment you meted out, but from the knowledge that even though they believed they were in control, they never were. Destroying a network of manipulation doesn't require shouting or public exposure. The most effective way, and the most painful for those manipulating, is the silent collapse, the one that happens without them realizing it until it's too late. You don't bring down the structure with a single blow. You remove, one by one, the pieces that hold it together. First, you withdraw their attention, then their emotional engagement, then their physical presence, and by the time they realize it, there's no more game to play. This elegant destruction is confusing because the manipulator thrives on drama. Without reaction, without scandal, without a platform, they lose their reason for existing. What was once a narrative they controlled falls apart before their firm and calm stance. And contrary to what they expected, you don't try to repair anything, you don't try to salvage relationships, you don't try to justify yourself, you just carry on. The result is devastating because it exposes how much the entire manipulation depended on you. Without your involvement, the entire castle crumbles. And the worst part for them is that there's no one to blame but themselves. The destruction was a direct consequence of their own actions, and that's something that can't be reversed. In the end, perhaps what hurts them most isn't the loss of your presence, but the realization that you were never the victim they imagined. On the contrary, you became the greatest lesson they ever received. Your posture, your silence, your ability to see through the masks and act at the right time became an uncomfortable mirror, reflecting truths they spent their lives trying to hide. You didn't have to destroy reputations, expose stories, or seek revenge. Your simple choice not to be fooled was enough to render the entire game meaningless. And by emerging unscathed, you left behind a trail of conscience they can't erase. Every time they try to manipulate someone else, they'll remember you. Every time they believe they're in control, they'll feel the nagging reminder that someone saw right through them and walked away unscathed. This is the true victory, not just surviving the manipulation, but becoming the brand that prevents it from happening again. You didn't just end a story, you redefined the rules. And while they're stuck trying to understand how they lost, you carry on, knowing that the greatest power is that which doesn't need to be proven.